Race, how it all started, where it came from, and our path throughout history to this very day. Everyone has a general idea of our path as species, that we originated in Africa and expanded through the globe. But we are species the first ones to reach those supposed unexplored areas? Let's see what other human species were already thriving in Eurasia. Before Homo sapiens spread through the world, and in this case to Europe, this land was already home to our distant cousins, the Homo Neanderthals. It is correct to affirm they are our cousins, as we share a common species that both of us derived from in the past, the Homo heidelbergensis, which originated in Africa 2 million years ago from Homo erectus, and separated into two groups. One group stood in Africa and became what we know today as Homo sapiens, and the other group went north and became Homo Neanderthals. Each group evolved differently from one another, as it is shown through human remains of these species. Both evolved at the same time, it is believed. The earliest Neanderthal and sapien remains are roughly from 430,000 years ago, and are very important to understand why both were built a certain way. African and European landscapes were very different in that era even today, and it is only obvious that these species would become different in their physical structure. The Neanderthals were living in Ice Age Europe, a rough landscape covered with ice sheets covering most of continent which lasted thousands of years, and forced our cousins to endure it and survive in it. In order to adapt to the cold and harsh climate, the Neanderthals had to evolve physically to survive in this extreme conditions. In contrast to our physically structured today, the Neanderthals were shorter on average, very robust, had light fair skin, blue eyes and red hair. But why? The shorter you and the more robust we are, it's more easier to stay warm and conserve energy, and the lack of sunlight in Ice Age Europe shaped them to produce less melanin in order to consume the little brisk of light a day could offer to stay energetic and productive. Neanderthals lived in a tribal system. They were spread out through Europe but lived in many small groups. Experts believe they were made up of a maximum of 15 individuals in a vast area. Keeping up these numbers was hard because life was brutal. Every day was death certain for our cousins. They were out every day to hunt wild game. And this wild game were not light as you might imagine, as our species had to become very robust to survive in this landscape. It is also clear that the animals had to become thicker and larger too, in order to survive in the harsh conditions. They would have to hunt huge buffaloes and mammoths if they wanted to have food for days. This task was not an easy one. A Neanderthal tribe would need to pick the youngest, more weak mammoth and isolate him from the rest of herd, and it would still be very dangerous, even if it is a young, not fully strong mammoth with his size and weight, and not forgetting those huge tusks that could trust and trespass your entire body. But our species are very wit and developed something that no animal is able to. It's communications. Our species were able to devise a plan and perform it in time and speak to each other while doing it. It is believed that our cousins would use fire to cause panic among the herd and try to isolate a single young mammoth and trap it down in a valley where the Neanderthals would use the high slopes and the distance to their advantage, throwing a primitive lance at the mammoth. They used a 2-meter-long spear that could be thrown from 20 meters away from the target and land it fatally perfect. When the prey was visually hurt, the Neanderthals would get dangerously close and thrust their spear into the mammoth or buffalo. When the hunt would go well, our cousins would get on top of the dead animals and start to cut them open with specific tools such as sharp-edged stones, taking out large humps of meat and their skin both for survival. Reasons they would use fire to soften up the meat and eat it to stay alive and energetic for yet another hunt, and the animal's skin to make clothing for the cold climate and stay warm and protect from the environment. But it was not over, because the Neanderthals were not the only ones on the hunt for these animals. Ice Age Europe were home to many huge and very dangerous predators, such bears, cave lions, and more commonly known saber-toothed tigers that would attack both other animals and humans. And so our distant cousins lived through thousands of years in Ice Age Europe, but then suddenly something started to change. 130,000 years ago, a warm and relatively moist phase has began which lasted until 115,000 years ago. The ice sheet melted in a large portion and paved way for our cousin to areas to the north, which were arid and unfit to live before. followed by a high phase with a more stable and moderate climate around 70,000 years ago, where most of ice sheets had fully retreated to the north, shaping modern Europe as we know it today. The Neanderthals expanded to northern Europe, pursuing the large herds that provide them with everything they needed. But our cousins are dying out. Experts cannot determine the key factor to this event. Could have been the warm climate killing a species that was built for hard cold climate and was no longer fit for this era. But also, this event coincides in a morbid way with another huge event. It is only fair to expect another human species to also expand to the north from the hot plains of Africa to Europe. And so, it happens around 48,000 years ago. The Homo sapiens arrive in what is now Anatolia, coming from Africa through the Levante, and has their first encounter with their cousins. It was found here in modern-day Turkey, the remains of a Neanderthal that had a fatal wound on his thorax made. It was found carved into his bone the remain of throwing spear that was much different from a Neanderthal spear, which was smaller and with a different design, which were found to be heavily used by Homo sapiens. This indicates there were conflict between the two species, perhaps over food or territorial disputes. It has found evidence of conflict through many sites around Europe. With the years passing, the Neanderthals lose basically all of their land to the modern humans. Their last stronghold is believed to be in Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, and then they became extinct about 24,000 years ago. Our cousins are no more, but they live in us. Both species procreated with one another, and imported to us very important trait to us. They are the reason. We were able to have light eyes, fair skin, and brown, red or blonde hair. Scientists claim that outside of sub-Saharan Africa, populations have between 0 to 3% of Neanderthal DNA, the strongest percentage being of course in Europe. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button below for more content like this. Stay curious, keep exploring, and I'll see you in the next video.